Number 10, Sasha Bordeaux. I actually really like Sasha, and even her relationship with Batman, I don't mind. It's more the premise of sort of how she was introduced and got involved with Bruce Wayne. Sasha was hired on to be Bruce Wayne's bodyguard, which, like, I guess okay, but does Bruce Wayne even need a bodyguard if he's Batman? Also, is it wise to hire a bodyguard when you have a secret identity and would then need to try and sort of sneak around them to just kind of keep that identity a secret? Just seems a little strange. Sasha ended up teaming up with Batman after she discovered his secret identity, and another weird thing there is that she actually could keep up with bats, when he usually spends years training people to be able to even keep up with him. These two had a very brief romance, which would get dropped almost as soon as it was kind of introduced to us. Number 9, Catwoman. I know what you might be thinking, but Amanda, Cat and Bat is a classic. So classic, in fact, that we even have a Bat-Cat Black Label series going on right now at DC. And hey, I agree with you, but the fact of the matter remains that the idea of Batman, who very passionately stands up for justice, ending up with a consistent criminal and thief like Catwoman doesn't really make a ton of sense. If we go back to that original meeting, you'd actually see just how ridiculous this relationship is in theory, and how crazy it is that Catwoman was able to get away just because Batman was attracted to her. In fact, this has kind of become a weird trope in the comics where when Selina does something criminal, Batman is usually still willing to kind of let her off. Like, he'll be like, don't do that, Selina, but in the end, he's probably just gonna let her get away with it. I just mean, I don't think he would act the same way if Mr. Freeze was stealing diamonds. Do you? Number 8, Silver St. Cloud. I honestly like Bruce and Silver together. Of course, weirdness does have to come into this relationship because Batman is never allowed to be happy. Weirdness came in the form of dramatic tragedy, which, let's be honest, is looming around the corner in pretty much every relationship Batman has. The particularly strange thing here is that Batman didn't seem to see it coming at all. He had begun to open up to trust both Silver and his new partner, Baphomet, even thinking of perhaps retiring. Obviously, letting his guard down was a huge mistake, as it resulted in Silver's death, which really sucks, because, you know, this means that it will make it even harder for Bats to, like, actually let people in again in the future, as if it wasn't hard enough for him. Poor Batman, he just can't get a break. Number 7, Batwoman, but not Kate Kane Batwoman, because that would be pretty weird considering that she's gay and she's also Batman's cousin. Instead, we're talking here about Kathy Kane, the first Batwoman who was introduced in the 1950s, because people were worried Batman was turning kids gay. Oh, the shock, the horror. Wait, so is that how I ended up gay? Not only is the reasoning behind why Kathy Kane needed to show up and date Batman pretty freaking weird, but also the idea that Kathy Kane would really be interested in Batman is also a little strange. It seemed like she never really needed a partner, so the relationship there felt a little bit forced. Still, it didn't stop writers from turning Kathy into a marriage-obsessed partner in crime and in romance, because that was the 50s in comics. Everyone's like, I'll trick him into marrying me. Number 6, Zatanna Zatara. The weird part of these two together is that it's never really happened. Instead, we've only got teases about this and seen that both Bruce and Zatanna definitely have feelings for one another that they never really fully commit to acting on. I mean, maybe they had a thing when they were teenagers, but that's about it. That's the weirdest thing for me, because I do feel like Bruce and Zatanna would actually make a pretty good couple together, and probably dating Zatanna would open up Batman to a whole new magical world. I mean, sure, he's dabbled in magic before, but he's never really, like, fully dove into that. See, I'm diving again. What's up with that? Similarly to how he seems to approach his relationship with his longtime friend and possible lover Zatanna herself. Just kind of like, putting a toe in, it's not gonna fully jump in that pool. Number 5, Julia Pennyworth. Maybe the most awkward relationship that Batman has had, if we can call it a relationship. Well, maybe not the most awkward actually, because there's been some pretty bad ones, but this one is definitely up there. Julia Pennyworth is Alfred's daughter, and she had a thing for Batman. Although he never really reciprocated the feelings, this was still a strange one. Especially the one moment when Julia kisses Batman after he saves her in front of his girlfriend Vicky Vale, who did not yet know that Bruce Wayne was Batman, making her line about approving of Julia's moves where she kisses Batman, so long as the recipient wasn't Bruce Wayne, pretty awkward. Because, yeah, we all know that he is Bruce Wayne. Yikes! Number 4, Black Canary. Definitely one of the weirdest ones out there because we usually associate Black Canary with Green Arrow, which wouldn't that cause some bad blood between Green Arrow and Batman, who are usually both on the Justice League? You bet it would. These two have been shipped together in the comics a few times. One of the strangest times, though, has to be in All-Star Batman and Robin, when they hooked up after Batman had a sexy display of his brute force and strength, which left Black Canary unable to resist him. I mean, I get that Batman is totally hot, as Black Canary calls him, and that he just helped Canary out there. He kind of like saved her. But I feel like it should take more than just that violent act for Black Canary to jump all over him. But hey, this is All-Star Batman, so no. The fact that Batman also seems to be thinking of Catwoman the whole time as well makes it a pretty awkward tumble around the smashed up docks. Goddamn, as Frank Miller would say. Number 3, Poison Ivy. If you thought the relationship between Harley Quinn and Batman or Bruce Wayne was weird on the part 1 of this list, you are not going to believe the weirdness of Poison Ivy and the Bats together on this list. These two together are just weird because there isn't a lot of consistency. It really depends on who's writing as to what kind of relationship they have. Sometimes Ivy loves Batman. Sometimes she hates him and is willing to kill him. Sometimes she's his ally, and sometimes she's a full-on criminal. I mean, I'm not against her character evolving and changing, but it's this weird back and forth as opposed to like any straight up progression or evolution that makes this one really weird for me. I'm okay if she's a relationship with Batman, but can we just like evolve that and like kind of commit to that and make that an overarching thing? And I'm okay if she's like, I want to kill Batman, but then can we just make that like more killing and overarching villainy for her? I don't know. Number 2, Becca. This one was just pretty random. Also, it relates to some of the manipulation tactics that we've seen characters like Poison Ivy use on Batman, which is both weird and also is kind of creepy. Becca was the wife of the new god Orion, son of Darkseid. Her powers basically allow her to create desire in those to turn away from love, even though Batman has actually welcomed love on more than a few occasions. I think he's just in denial about it. But anyways, her powers also apparently create desire in her as well. How convenient. Needless to say, these two had a short relationship caused by her weird powers before she inevitably went back to being with Orion. Number 1, Nocturna. Just when you think it can't get any weirder, it most definitely can when we are talking Batman. Nocturna is a weird choice for not only Batman, but years later for Batwoman, Kate Kane, too. Especially considering that her and Batman had a thing. Although I guess it's a different continuity. Batwoman and Nocturna have an even more stranger and problematic relationship. But this time around, we're here to talk about Batman. These two together weren't that terrible, actually, and Natalia Knight, aka Nocturna, even became a sort of mother figure to Jason Todd. Or wait, does that make their relationship weirder? Because I think it does. In the end, she was stabbed to death, but managed to get into a hot air balloon and soar over Gotham just as she died and passed into a red storm. I guess so she could have like one last nice view before bleeding out. Don't worry though, Nocturna would return as an actual vampire as opposed to just a vampire-themed character, who would then move from Batman to Batwoman. Man, that sounds like a weird dating like game show that I would not want to be on. Or maybe I would want to be on it. I don't know, who could I date from Gotham? Some pretty cool people. Selena, Bruce. Although I don't know, Batman has a lot of problems. I think I just want to be friends with him. I don't think I'd want to date him. Number 10, Julie Madison. Not so much weird in the way her romance with Bruce went, especially considering this tends to be how most of them go. But Julie Madison had probably one of the weirdest romances because she was Bruce's first love that no one really ever talks about now. Julie Madison was first introduced in Detective Comics Volume Number 1 in issue 31. She was a socialite and later an actress originally who often played the role of damsel in distress in stories featuring her, where she would then need to be rescued by Batman. She also was dating and engaged to Bruce Wayne himself, but broke off their engagement because Bruce wouldn't get a real job, not knowing that, well, he was Batman. Although also kind of a weird criticism coming from a socialite, but I guess Julie had the job of an actress, working under the stage name Portia Storm, and Bruce being the owner of Wayne Enterprises. maybe didn't count. Granted, of course, Wayne Enterprises wouldn't actually be introduced in the comics until 1987, and Bruce does respond with the fact that he simply cannot be bothered with anything remotely connected with work. So yeah, I kind of get her mentality. She was like, "You gonna get a real job?" And he was like, "Girl, I have so much money, no." It's a fair response, but it's a fair concern. Number 9, Wonder Woman. These two are just kind of weird together because, well, they're not really on the same playing field. That being said, a lot of people love Batman and Wonder Woman together and heartily ship them, but for me, I personally think Wonder Woman is better without a man in her life. Even Steve Trevor, who often ends up being her mainstay love interest throughout many of her series. Diana and Bruce, beyond heroics, also don't really share a lot in common, and while Bruce likely has much to gain from being in a relationship with Diana in terms of what he can learn and how he can grow as an individual with her, I don't think Wonder Woman has as much to gain from him. Not to like super diss Bruce or anything like that, or Batman. Not to mention Bruce's terrible track record when it comes to, well, how he tends to treat his romantic partners, so might not be good. Although maybe Wonder Woman will put him in his place, but Alright friends, before we move on to this next point, if you want more weird love and lists like this, be sure to give this video a thumbs up. It really does help us out here at the channel. Number 8, Jim Gordon. In the Harley Quinn animated series, while the romance between Jim Gordon and Batman isn't quite official, it's still kind of implied that Jim has a bit of a thing for Batman. Or might, if he considered what his intense feelings potentially mean. In this show, we see Commissioner Gordon on the brink of a mental break, almost completely unhinged, bags under his eyes, and ranting at just about anyone who will listen to him about his distraught personal life and emotional baggage. He also just really likes to drink. He often turns to Batman, hoping he'll be his BFF, or more seeing him as his BFF and hoping he'll be there, and hoping he'll be that shoulder to cry on for him. But Batman only sees Jim as his co-worker in the series. However, he does begrudgingly agree to be friends with Commissioner Gordon near the end of the season 1 episode, "You're a damn good cop, Jim Gordon," in order to get Jim to give up Clayface's arm, who he has intensely befriended. Yeah, also if you haven't seen Harley Quinn the animated series, what are you doing with your life? Go watch it. It's so good. Number 7, Talia al Ghul. Even if you ship these two together, you have to admit how weird their relationship really is, especially when it comes to them having a child together, where all versions of how that went down are just really messed up and involve people having really weirdly positive feelings at times about things that should not be considered positive. The most well-known child of theirs together being Damian Wayne, who Talia forced herself on Bruce to get. Pretty awful. Add in the fact that they both come from two different sides of the tracks, and it makes for a messy romance, which for some works. I think Catwoman and Batman actually managed to not always see eye to eye and make it really work between them, but Talia and Bruce not having a lot of compromise between them makes it much more challenging. Also, she forced herself on him to get a son! This is not okay. Not okay. Not okay. Number 6, Andrea Beaumont. Andrea Beaumont in the animated universe was a young love of Bruce's. The two fell in love during their time together at Gotham University. Good old Gotham U. And were even engaged to be married, but Andrea had to break off the engagement as she and her father were leaving to go to Europe. Her father, you see, was involved in a criminal money laundering racket and had stolen money from the mob bosses that he worked for, turning that into a profitable fortune all its own. To escape his insidious partners who would kill him if they found out about his theft and found out that he was leaving, he left Gotham and hid himself and Andrea in Europe. Eventually, her father's location was sold out and he ended up being murdered by those he'd betrayed years before. Andrea, unable to accept this injustice, took her father's fortune and used it to train and get equipment to turn herself into the masked vigilante known as the Phantasm, returning to Gotham years later to get revenge on those responsible for her father's death. She also returned as Andrea Beaumont, claiming she had some accounts to settle and once again ran into her old flame, Bruce Wayne. Eventually, the two discovered one another's identities, Bruce Wayne as Batman and Andrea as the Phantasm. This revelation actually dramatically surprised Batman, especially as he had suspected that the Phantasm was a man. We all suspected that just because how the Phantasm looked, and then we were like, huh, there you go. Don't judge a book by its cover. Just because someone looks like a man doesn't mean they are a man. Gender pronouns. Look at this. We're having revelations here. Number 5, Jezebel Jet. One of the weirdest relationships Batman has had by far. His relationship with Jezebel Jet is strange considering all the revelations it came with. Jezebel was originally presented as the leader of a small nation, and, well, she was the leader of a small nation, but she was also secretly working for the evil organization known as the Black Glove, or, well, maybe not so secretly, apparently. Jezebel initially rebuked Bruce's advances when they first met, claiming she did not want to be another notch on his bedpost, but eventually the two did end up dating, and it even got serious enough that rumors spread of a potential proposal and engagement between the two. However, that definitely was not meant to be, as Jezebel ended up betraying Bruce, and I put that in air quotes because, well, Batman would actually later claim that he knew of her true allegiance and that she was planning to betray him all along, and that their whole seemingly real relationship from both sides had therefore been faked. How confusing. Number 4, Harley Quinn. We have seen some pretty flirty moments happen between these two across various comics, both in the main continuity and outside of it. In the alternate world of White Knight, Harley and Bats even seem to be moving towards some kind of romantic relationship or love connection after the death of Jack Napier, who was once the Joker, then reformed, and then lost his mind kind of again before he passed away. Recently, we've seen Batman and Harley teaming up during Joker War, and they've had some kind of strange and seemingly intimate emotional moments together. Although nothing physical ever happened between the two, unless it happened off panel or something. But definitely some emotional stuff is happening there. There's some relationship building. While Harley has always had a thing for Bruce Wayne, she has no interest in Batman, and so it really seems weird to me when writers or fans seem interested in matching these two up. Because like Harley with Bruce Wayne I could maybe see, but like Harley with Batman. Number 3, Ra's al Ghul. Am I gonna talk about this weird kiss? Well, you bet I'm gonna talk about this weird kiss. During Batman Beyond, Ra's comes up with the perfect scheme to preserve his own life after the Lazarus Pit failed to restore him. He takes over Talia's body and goes to Bruce disguised as her, attempting to seduce Bruce into agreeing to treatments which will see his youth and his strength restored to him. While under the guise of Talia, at one point Ra's even kisses Bruce to really sell this to him. Later, it's revealed what Ra's was really up to, hoping to de-age Bruce and swap bodies with him, returning to Gotham posing as the son of Talia and Bruce. Fortunately, Batman, Terry McGinnis, stops him, and even Bruce seems weirded out by the fact that Ra's in Talia's body made out with him. Which, yeah, that's weird. Right? Number 2, Cheetah. In the Justice League animated series, Cheetah and Batman have a really weird, sexy moment together. Master of Seduction, Batman, is obviously meant to be playing Cheetah here, and she totally falls for it, sealing their newfound respect for one another with a kiss. It is also heavily implied here that Batman has a cat fetish. I'll let you be the judge on that one, though I suspect there might actually be something more to that bit than it just being something you say to manipulate a cat lady like Cheetah. Number 1, Barbara Gordon. I mean, if we are talking about weird Batman ships and relationships, this has to be one of the weirdest ones out there. Honestly, if you think Batman and Robin are weird, this is on the same level as that. Barbara Gordon is also known as Batgirl, a member of the Bat family and Batman's protege and sidekick. She's also known for being the longtime love interest of Dick Grayson, who to Batman is like a son. She is also known for being the daughter of Commissioner Jim Gordon, Batman's colleague and his friend. And yet, outside the main continuity, Batman and Batgirl have slept together and had a relationship. At one point in Batman Beyond 2.0, the digital comic series, Bruce even got Babs pregnant while Dick was out of town in a flashback story. Awkward for so many reasons. While it's important to consider this is an alternate universe and many people therefore don't consider it to be canon, it's still, in my mind, pretty weird and messed up that Bab is part of a love triangle featuring both Dick Grayson and Bruce Wayne. Number 10, Black Widow and the Hulk. Maybe the only one on this list that is weird in a cute way. For this relationship, we have to turn to the MCU, as Black Widow and the Hulk have never got it on in the comics. Probably why this screen romance caught so many off guard. In fact, I feel like most of us were expecting Hawkeye and Black Widow to get together, as this is a relationship that happened in the comics. When we turn to Scarlett Johansson and Mark Ruffalo to ask more about their characters, they say that the two have a lot more in common than people would initially think. Both characters often feel as
though they are monsters, and it is this self-reflection that grounds their relationship and really allows them to connect. They see parts of themselves in each other, and see in each other the potential to transcend their monstrous sides of themselves. I think they both inspire each other to be better. So although it is a weird couple to ship, Hulk Tasha is also kinda sweet and great. You just gotta run with this one. Number 9. Bucky Barnes and Gail Richards, aka Captain America's fiance. Turning to Good Old Earth 1610 and the Ultimates 2002 series, we discover that there is a reality where Bucky Barnes ended up marrying his best friend Steve's fiance, Gail Richards. After Steve Rogers went MIA in the war, Bucky and Gail apparently hooked up, got married, and had 4 children. Needless to say, everyone in that love triangle was a little perturbed when Steve returned years later. Sounds like an awkward situation. Number 8. Any relationship involving Venom. Let's boil this down. If you are dating Eddie Brock when he's Venom, you're not just dating Eddie Brock, you are dating a symbiote. Congratulations. Venom is a character that is very interesting because they are in a relationship with whoever they are bonded to, and then inviting someone else into that relationship, let's just say things can get weird really quickly. Cut to all of the babies Venom has had and how weird that was. Not to mention, Venom just has a weird kinda icky sexy quality. It's not necessarily Venom's fault, they were just drawn that way. The muscles, the tongue, it's just kind of a lot. There are a lot of really twisted takes on romantic moments involving Venom in the comics. Don't believe me? Check New Avengers Annual 3 from 2005, where Venom sexy interrogates Clint Barton, and the intense deadly French kiss the Thing receives from Venom in Venom issue 11 from 2003. Not to mention Eddie Brock and Venom's somewhat unhealthy codependent relationship, which we constantly get examples of in comics, cartoons, and film. Number 7. Doc Ock and Aunt May. This relationship could only exist in the 1963 series The Amazing Spider-Man, issue 131. In this issue, Doc Ock is about to marry Aunt May when Spider-Man shows up to put a stop to it. Although Doc Ock only wants to marry Aunt May because she just inherited a nuclear facility from a dead relative. I know. Weird thing to inherit. Despite this, Doc Ock is actually quite nice to Aunt May, which makes this relationship even weirder. It's also weird because other Spider-Man villains show up wanting to kidnap May instead and steal her away from Doc Ock, which is what Doc Ock could have done, but instead he chose to woo and marry her. Talk about a weird storyline and relationship. Number 6. Steve Rogers and Sharon Carter. Yep. Steve Rogers decides to date Sharon Carter, who while originally in the comics was Peggy's younger sister, has now been established in Marvel as Peggy's great niece. This was changed to help the timeline seem more logical and make more sense, cause, you know, aging. What isn't logical is the idea of these two dating. Although Sharon is an agent working for S.H.I.E.L.D., shares similar interests with Cap, and looks like Peggy Carter, does not mean these two should hook up. It's just, well, creepy. I could go into more detail, but I figured I'd leave the rest to MCU Peggy herself, actress Hayley Atwell, who's quoted saying it best. Hayley is reported saying, "I just feel that, you know, I wouldn't want to date my great aunt's guy. It just feels like it crosses an incestuous boundary. And Peggy just died. That's even more disrespectful, right? It's like, don't touch that. You can't tap that." Number 5. Batman and Batgirl. A lot of controversy around these two, although I cannot deny that there are sparks on screen with them sometimes. Despite that, this relationship still feels forced. Where they have always been portrayed as having a father-daughter relationship in the comics, lately something weird has been brewing between them in Gotham. The two weirdest parts of this relationship are number 1, Batgirl aka Barbara Gordon's romantic relationship with Dick Grayson happening at the same time. This is explored even more in the Batman Beyond 2.0 comic series, where we find out Batgirl was cheating on Dick with Batman and became pregnant as a result. The second weirdest being the age disparity and mentorship between Bruce and Barbara. Not to mention, Barbara is the daughter of Batman's friend, James Gordon. Just ick. Number 4. Black Widow and Ivan Petrovich. Another creepy father-daughter relationship gone wrong. Ivan Petrovich is Natasha Romanoff, aka Black Widow's adopted father. He saved her after she was thrown from a burning building and took her to the Red Room, where she was trained and grew up to be an amazingly skilled assassin. Ivan follows Black Widow seemingly everywhere and always makes an effort to aid her and keep her safe. However, he also consistently tries to flirt with her and put creepy moves on her. He even professes his love to her, and after she spurns his advances, confessing she will only ever love him as a father, he goes crazy and turns himself into a monster-like cyborg. Talk about a drama queen. Number 3. Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch. Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch have always loved each other, but no, like, really loved each other. This was a romance never explicitly talked about in the comics, but merely alluded to in the looks the brother and sister duo gave each other, the way they held each other, and some of the things that they said. But being kids to Magneto couldn't have been easy, and maybe those looks and maybe those touches could have been explained simply by them feeling as though they were the only real family they had. Maybe that is why they're also so protective of each other. Nope. Just kidding, because then the 2002 Ultimate Series surfaced, which pretty much all in all confirmed what we'd all been speculating. Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch, Pietro and Wanda, brother and sister, are in a relationship. And they have been in love with each other since they were kids. So, yeah. And if you think that's bad, that's not even the worst of them. Number 2. Harley Quinn and the Joker. The relationship to almost end all weird relationships, but not quite. Harley Quinn and the Joker have had a messy and abusive on and off again relationship throughout their history together. Harley was actually only kept on in the comic world because she was so popular with the fans. Joker was originally written as a sociopath that only cared about him and himself and never anyone else, which makes it hard for him to date. Although throughout the animated series, multiple comic book series, and on the big screen, we do get genuine moments of affection between these two, there is always a push to follow the pull. Joker has difficulty enjoying the vulnerable parts of himself that Harley brings out. Joker sees Harley as a weakness and is always attempting to eliminate her at all costs, with constant attempts of him trying to murder her being shown in the comics and cartoons.
You always take shots from folks who just don't get the joke.
And Harley always comes back to him because she is codependent and possibly suffering from Stockholm Syndrome, or hybristophilia. Hybristophilia would make the most sense considering her other partners, as it is the attraction to those who have done something bad. Cue Deadshot and Poison Ivy. Though lately Harley has been actively trying to stay away from Mr. J, and thankfully this destructive duo have become somewhat less inseparable than they once were. Number 1. ARISIA RRAB and Hal Jordan. A relationship between two Green Lanterns seems normal until we realize this was a big brother, little sister type relationship. In the comics, ARISIA originally is written as an admirer of Hal's. She idolizes him. Then she has a crush on him. Then she's in love with him? She professes her love, to which Hal originally rebukes her for, claiming she is too young for him, specifically pointing out that she is half his age. Eventually, she manages to age herself accidentally, both mentally and physically, using her own willpower and the aid from her Green Lantern ring. Still, Hal says he feels it is wrong, but apparently doesn't really fully mean that, as they still end up together anyway. The beginning of this relationship is followed with a lot of exposition in the comics, explaining why this relationship is really a-okay. And even after the writers changed for the comic series, the relationship somehow was allowed to be continued. When the two finally broke it off, it didn't even predominantly have to do with the age issue. I'm not sure what was weirder, the fact that this was written, or the fact that everyone was seemingly so okay with it.
Kicking off the list at number 10. Beast Boy and Raven. Okay, they say opposites attract, so when you put together an immature shape-shifting prankster with a half-demon sorceress, things are bound to get a little weird at some point. Fans weren't really sure why the two had it out for each other, being so different and all. See, everybody didn't really expect them to last. Even during their time together, readers found it just not that thrilling. The chemistry was just, dare I say, bland, or not as big as some other relationships. Like in the early 2000s cartoon, she's annoyed by Beast Boy. She doesn't like how he's immature and how he does pranks and how he doesn't use his indoor voice ever, and she found his comedy to be annoying. And then in season 4 of Teen Titans Go, episode 12, it shows Beast Boy writing a song to tell Raven how he feels about her. And then in episode 13, Beast Boy tours with the song, but it annoys Raven. So he's playing his heart out, and she's like, I don't know, not really. And before we continue on with this list, guys, if you haven't already, please go ahead down below and give us a thumbs up, because it really does help the channel out a lot and it makes us feel good in our tummies. So please go ahead and do that if you haven't already. Thank you so much, and back to the list. Number 9. Jinx and Kid Flash. The Teen Titans show from the early 2000s, we saw Cyborg and Jinx flirting a lot while they were fighting. It was good. It's a nice little dynamic, keeping it real. They were fan favorites, and she was this villainous teenage sorceress who hit enemies with bad luck. And then in the episode Lightspeed, which aired in the final season, we see the introduction of Kid Flash. And in the same episode, this romance between him and Jinx was born in the same episode, which in turn resulted in her switching over to the good side, which is great. I mean, yay, go team. Like, that's a great win. But in one episode, with all that groundwork with Cyborg just kind of washed away, viewers weren't too pleased at the choices. Number 8, AQUAGIRL and Static. Guess you can say there wasn't a lot of friction with this one. Static. Okay, yeah, you're right. Guys, love is all about timing. Maybe you bump into somebody at a coffee shop, maybe you hit it off then, and then Bob's your uncle. Or maybe you meet somebody when you're captured by the Terra Titans and you're forced to fight as gladiators in the Dark Side Club. Whatever your origin story is, I hope the love works out. Well, that's just the case for Static and AQUAGIRL. See, when she got back to Titan's Tower, she decided to rejoin as a member with no other options really at that point. And she was getting along with these heroes as well, specifically Blue Beetle and Static. Like, she flirted a bit with Blue Beetle, but with Static, he was also a victim from the Dark Side Club, and they had a lot more in common because they're both kind of going through that together. You go through shit together, you get close. That's how it goes. He was also a victim from the Dark Side Club, and she convinced him to stay with the Teen Titans afterwards. So they had some history there, be it good or bad. So she convinced him to stay with the Teen Titans, although he had a family that was worried sick about him, and they were missing for like months, right? And the issue that fans recognized with this whole fling is that AQUAGIRL was a flirt with the entire team, and it just didn't make sense for them both to share any affection with each other at this point. Number 7, Raven and Kid Flash. Raven needed help from the Teen Titans, but when she went looking for it, the team was not together at the time. So she enlisted the help of Kid Flash, whom she had a relationship with, and they were both able to convince the Teen Titans to get back together. Sounds like the perfect couple. Sounds like they're working it out awesome. I mean, being able to put together a team of supers, like, that's hashtag couple goals right there. Only the thing was, they weren't really in love. Yeah. See, later it was revealed that Kid Flash's feelings were all part of the spell that Raven used on him. She manipulated his feelings, so of course, after that point, it's safe to say the trust between the two was a little bit jaded, a little bit weak. Number 6, Nightwing and Mirage. Miriam Delgado, aka Mirage, comes from the future. And in that future, she's together with Nightwing, who ends up not actually being Nightwing. So Mirage, Redwing, and others joined their forces and became the Team Titans. And the only way to defeat Lord Chaos was to travel back in time and take out his mother. The classic time heist go-to scenario. So they went back 10 years, but they ended up in a different timeline. Also, that's how time works. Never works. Classic time thing. Hey, you wanted this? Nope, now you're in the 50s. So they still went ahead with their plan anyways, and then Mirage thought it would be a smart idea to impersonate Starfire and try and get with the leader of the new Titans, Nightwing. See, that plan didn't work after all, but they ended up joining forces to take out Lord Chaos anyways. So Starfire, during this time, of course, lost a lot of trust from Mirage. So she hooked up with who she thought was her future man, and Dick didn't even notice during this crazy night that it wasn't her. It's just, this is definitely one for the books. Number 5, Nightwing and Raven. Nightwing and Starfire were together for a while. They were members of the team, they got along, and they're probably one of the better couples. If we did a list about top 10 better couples, they would for sure be in that list. So they were about to get married. They were so close. They were literally right there at the altar when all of a sudden Raven showed up to destroy the wedding, even taking out the priest before he made it official. So Starfire and Dick ended up calling it after some time because Starfire felt like Dick wasn't really in it for the long run. And then Dick was kind of like, you're not wrong. So Raven and Dick were never a couple in the comics. This is an important note. So for her to come out all of a sudden and be attracted to Nightwing was just the writers trying to make Dick seem like a bigger catch at this point. Raven was just getting used to having emotions at this time, being fair, but when it came to keeping it cool around Dick, or rather Nightwing, but when it came down to keeping it cool, acting chill around Nightwing, she just couldn't get a grip, but everything else in her life she could control. She just had to ruin the wedding, eh? I mean, no dancing to shout, no white wine. Number 4, Kid Flash and Solstice. When Bart was captured and forced to serve a life of labor on a distant and lonely planet, Solstice, who at the time was in love with him, just head over heels, took out an agent of the Functionary just so she could serve the same punishment and be with him. I remember one time in high school, I said I was part of this group that was slacking off. I got in trouble just so I could go to detention with them, or else I'd eat alone, you know? Ride or die, let's do it. So I get it, but I mean, these stakes were just, a tad higher. So Bart, Kieran, and Superboy decide to remain in the 30th century, and Bart and Solstice were trapped on the planet Takaran Galtos, forced to kill and survive. All the while, love just flows in the air between them. Number 3, Robin and Wonder Girl. This next one is absolutely insane. Okay, so gross as well. So after the death of Superboy in Infinite Crisis, Robin's plan was to try and replace him with a clone using Superboy's corpse. Now, of course, that was way easier said than done, and this failed over and over and over again. So Wonder Girl waltzes in and then sees Robin frustrated at these failures, and he starts to destroy all of these attempts of a clone. Then they both bonded over how upset they were at the loss of Superboy, and with all the remains of all these clones just strewn about, just squishing under their feet, they shared a kiss while a tear was coming down their face. Beautiful moment, definitely a beautiful moment to be like, hey, we're gonna get through this, you know, like I miss him too. But like, you're standing on his spleen. You're standing on like 7 of his spleens, all these clones. I'd be like, hey, can we mop first? Like this is gross. I'm hearing squishy squishes while I'm trying to hug you. Can we please get a janitor? I mean, bonding over a death, sure, that's normal, but bonding over the death of somebody that's spilt around you, no way, we can't overlook that. Number 2, Beast Boy and Terra. She pops up in the 2nd season episode titled Terra, of course, when she's running away from a giant scorpion, which sounds like all my nightmares, sounds terrifying. Massive scorpions, no thank you. So the Titans, of course, come to the rescue, but help is not something she needed, really. Yeah, she was actually leading the scorpion into a trap where she would then use her powers to cause this stone bridge to collapse and take out this giant arachnid. And then when she introduces herself to the team, Beast Boy gets shy. He turns into a shy boy. He turns himself into a little turtle, which is something I try and do often. I'm like, oh, we got company. Back into my shell. This neck goes all the way into this hoodies when I'm nervous, when I'm a shy boy. And she loves it. She thinks he's hilarious. She thinks he's the cutest guy ever. Fair. So now Terra and Beast Boy are close. Beast Boy convinces Terra to stay with the team and train, but during that conversation by the water, Terra accidentally moves a rock that Beast Boy is sitting on, so now the secret is out. Terra cannot control her powers. The next day when she's being tested by the team on said powers, Beast Boy gives a few words of encouragement and she completes it. Perfect, love it. This sounds great so far, Taylor. What are you getting at? Does it get worse? This is number 2 for a reason. Then they receive a signal that Slade Wilson has returned and they track his location. So Beast Boy invites Terra. Terra's like, yeah, I'm ready to go. Clearly I passed this test, let's do it. So Terra ends up cornering Slade, and then Slade explains how the team will get rid of her once they realize she can't fully control her powers. He's playing the mind game, okay? But his whole pitch here is that he can surely help with that aspect. He can help her control the powers. So she tells him to hit the road, and then she becomes a full member. Now, during a rendezvous with Beast Boy, the couple cross paths with Slade again, and then Slade reveals that Terra had been a spy the whole time. And to make matters even worse, somehow, in the Judas Contract storyline in the comics, one of the main reasons behind this betrayal was that she, at 15, and Deathstroke were in love. Let's go a little bit higher. Maybe like a lot higher, Deathstroke. I don't know. I mean, age is just a number. Sometimes that number is 15, and sometimes these storylines are pretty. And finally, number 1, Donna Troy and Terry Long. Of course, for number 1, we have to end on the worst couple of all time. So Donna married Terry Long, who was a college professor at the time, and he was in his 30s and was previously divorced. And Donna, again, age is just a number. She was 19 years old and in his class. Yeah, she was his student. He was the teacher. So, oof. So Terry was working a few jobs just to make ends meet, but he wasn't a great boyfriend while they were dating by any means. He hit on her friends numerous times and he used her to get some clout. They were married with a kid until a car crash was just written into the story, taking out Terry and his son, who would go on to become Lord Chaos. So yeah, get rid of a lot of that stuff. Let's just get rid of a lot of that stuff. Fans were not happy with this element of the story, and it's totally justified. And also, bonus points for him hitting on Starfire, and then Starfire also had a crush on him back while this was happening. It was just a mess. I feel like I was watching The Bachelor in Paradise. Just, ugh.